Behind the calm facade, my family seemed perfect, with Henry as the trusted father figure. But an unexpected call revealed his dark secret, leaving me torn. Should I face the truth or stay silent to protect my family? Do I dare to uncover it all? This is a true story, but the names of the characters have been changed. My name is Emily, 32 years old, born and raised in Portland, Oregon. To me, Portland is a city where the air always seems to carry a hint of rain and the rich aroma of coffee from cozy little cafes on every corner. I work as an office assistant for a large insurance company. A stable job, pays the bills, though sometimes it feels a bit monotonous. This Sunday morning felt like any other at the start of fall, with a slight chill in the air and the first few red and yellow leaves starting to collect on the sidewalk outside. These quiet weekend mornings are precious to me. They have a kind of peace and calm that's so different from the busyness of the work week. I live with my mom and my stepfather, Henry, in a small house in a bustling neighborhood on the north side of the city. My parents divorced when I was only 8. My father left, leaving my mom to raise me on her own. For a child, that was a pretty heavy blow, and for years, I barely saw him. My mom always did her best to make up for it, though I would sometimes catch her quietly staring out the window at night. A few years later, she met Henry through a mutual friend. At first, I wasn't sure how I felt about someone else coming into our lives, but he gradually won me over. Henry was calm, caring, and always looked out for my mom and me, and over time, I began to see him as a second father. Their marriage wasn't some fairy tale romance, but it was a relationship built on mutual respect and support between two people who had both been hurt in the past. Still, things started to change when my mom was diagnosed with a chronic illness that gradually weakened her physically and took a toll on her spirit. Henry stayed by her side and took care of her, but I noticed them growing distant. Once, I overheard my mom sigh and say she felt like a burden, that maybe Henry would be better off without her. In those moments, I felt a wave of worry, but I tried to reassure myself that her illness was probably making her think negatively. That morning, I spent a few hours tidying up, preparing breakfast, and savoring the familiar peace of the weekend. This little ritual was something I had kept up for years, a small space to relax, clear my mind, and enjoy time with family. Sitting down with a cup of coffee, watching sunlight filter through the window, I was surprised by a call from Anna, my best friend from high school. Anna and I used to be inseparable, the kind of friends who went through everything together. But work and the twists and turns of life have made it harder for us to stay in touch over the last few years. So, seeing her name pop up on a Sunday morning caught me off guard and sent a small shiver of worry through me. I picked up, and Anna's voice came through, sounding hesitant, which was unlike her usual cheerful tone. "Emily. How are you? There's something I need to tell you." She began slowly. I could already feel something was wrong, a strange unease building in the pit of my stomach. Anna and I had been best friends since high school, and there was little we hadn't shared with each other. From first crushes, late-night study sessions, to life's inevitable disappointments, she had been my closest friend through it all. Even as we drifted to different paths after graduation, our bond stayed strong, though we saw each other less frequently as life got in the way. Knowing her as well as I did, I could sense something deeply unsettling in her voice today, and it only made me more nervous. After a few moments of silence, I heard Anna take a deep breath, as if gathering every ounce of courage to continue. "Emily, yesterday I saw Henry," she began, her voice hesitant, as though she were carefully weighing each word. "I don't know how to say this, but I think you need to know." At her words, I felt myself freeze, a wave of apprehension washing over me. Henry, my stepfather, the man I had always regarded as the unwavering foundation of our family, the one who brought stability and calm to my mother and me. What could there possibly be about him that would make Anna so reluctant to speak? My mind raced, filled with questions and a rising, indescribable dread. Why Henry? He was always so quiet, kind, and dependable. For as long as he had been with my mother, I had never once seen him do anything to cause her distress or disappointment. He was the last person I would ever suspect of hiding anything, always composed and steady, a rock we all leaned on. As I waited, my heart pounded, unsure of how to brace myself for what Anna was about to reveal. Part of me wanted to stop her, to somehow prevent her from saying whatever it was that felt like an impending storm. Yet another part of me knew I had to hear it, even though I sensed that whatever she was about to share would change everything. Her voice pulled me back to the present, soft but firm as she said, "Emily, this might be hard to accept, but you deserve to know the truth." A mix of confusion and dread filled me, coupled with an unfamiliar fear. Henry had been such an essential part of my life, someone I had never once doubted. And yet, there was something in Anna's voice, a subtle warning, that made my heart race with anxiety over what was about to come to light. I held my breath, steeling myself for the words that I wasn't sure I was ready to face. I waited, barely breathing, as Anna continued, her voice dropping lower, almost as if she feared someone else might overhear. "Last night, I went out with some friends to a bar downtown. It was a gay bar. I almost couldn't believe it when I saw Henry there, with another man. And they weren't just sitting together." Her voice caught, and she paused before going on. "They looked close, Emily. It wasn't the way two friends would be sitting together. They seemed completely absorbed in each other, like nothing else around them mattered." Anna's words hit me like a punch to the gut, and I sat there, stunned and unable to respond. The image of Henry, steady, dependable Henry, the man who had been with my mother for over 30 years, the man I trusted as my second father, suddenly felt shattered, as though I'd been looking at a portrait that had hidden cracks all along. Memories of family dinners, holidays, and quiet moments flashed through my mind, but each felt distant, almost unreal, in the light of what I'd just heard. I struggled to make sense of it, to reassure myself that there had to be some logical explanation. Maybe Anna had misunderstood, or maybe it was all a mistake, someone who only looked like Henry. But the conviction in her voice, the careful way she'd chosen her words, left no room for doubt. Her words echoed in my mind, each one pressing deeper, as I pictured the scene she'd described. The thought of him, so openly intimate with someone else, in a way that could not be mistaken, left me feeling bewildered and unsteady. Trying to ground myself, I gripped the edge of the table, taking a few shaky breaths as a mix of emotions overwhelmed me: shock, disbelief, hurt. I couldn't reconcile the Henry the first knew with this image Anna had just painted. For as long as I could remember, he had been a constant presence, someone who brought calm to our family, someone I'd counted on. And now, everything I thought I knew about him felt tainted by this newfound reality. Part of me wanted to deny it all, to dismiss it as some absurd misunderstanding, but another part knew that Anna wouldn't bring this up lightly. She knew what this news would mean to me. I felt a growing ache in my chest, an emptiness, as the weight of it all settled in. The sense of security and stability Henry had once provided felt like it was slipping through my fingers, leaving me with a strange feeling of betrayal and loss that I couldn't fully grasp. After hanging up, I sat there in silence, staring blankly ahead. It felt as if everything around me had suddenly gone quiet, leaving only an empty space, closing in on me. I couldn't wrap my head around what Anna had just told me. Henry, the calm, kind man I'd always considered a father, who had been by my mother's and my side for over 30 years. Could this really be the person I thought I knew so well? I tried to think rationally, telling myself that maybe Anna had seen someone else, or perhaps she had misunderstood the situation. But every word she'd said replayed in my mind, refusing to let me find any peace. The way she described it, the way Henry and that other man sat close, the way they seemed absorbed in each other as though no one else was around, those images haunted me, making every attempt at reassurance fall apart. A flood of questions started to race through my mind, each one pressing down on me like a weight. How long had Henry been seeing this man? Why would he have hidden this for so many years? And most troubling of all, how could my mother and I have been so completely unaware? I'd always believed I understood Henry, that I understood my family. But now, everything felt like it was unraveling, and I was completely powerless to stop it. Part of me wanted to go find him immediately, to confront him and demand answers. But then a wave of fear held me back. What if what Anna said was true? How would I face the answers he might give? I was terrified that, if I knew the truth, I'd never be able to look at Henry the same way again. And my mother, who was unwell and so completely dependent on him, how could she handle it if the secret were exposed? I stood up and started pacing the room, my mind in turmoil. The house, once a place of warmth, familiarity, and safety, now felt foreign, almost suffocating. It felt like a heavy weight was pressing down on my chest, and the sense of dread tightened around me, little by little. Finally, I sank back into my chair, holding my head in my hands, trying to figure out what to do next. It was as though my entire life was standing at a crossroads I'd never thought I'd have to face. After sitting in stunned silence, I realized I couldn't just do nothing. I needed to find out if what Anna had told me was true. A part of me still wanted to believe this was all just a misunderstanding, but if there was any truth to it, I had to know, for my mother's sake. She deserved the truth, even if I wasn't sure how she would cope with it. For a moment, I thought about confronting Henry directly. But the thought made me hesitate. Could I really look him in the eyes and ask him about something so devastating? And if he confirmed it, how would I handle hearing the truth from him? Asking him outright felt like tearing down everything stable my mother had relied on. I'd never felt so trapped in my own mind, unable to make sense of this impossible situation. That evening, I observed Henry more closely than ever before. When he got home, he was his usual self, warm, calm, asking my mom about her day, helping her with dinner, and chatting with me for a bit. Nothing seemed different. He still seemed like the devoted husband and dependable father figure I'd always known. But the more I watched him, the more unsettled I felt, because I couldn't see a trace of someone hiding a massive secret. Henry appeared completely normal, and I began to doubt myself. Was I reading too much into all of this? When everyone had gone to bed, I felt a restless, gnawing feeling that wouldn't let me sleep. The unease was overwhelming, and I made a decision I never thought I'd make. I decided to sneak into Henry's study and look through his things. I knew it was wrong, an invasion of his privacy, but the worry and confusion left me with no other option. I quietly opened the door to his study, stepping into the dim room and switching on my phone's flashlight. I began carefully going through the drawers and stacks of papers, making sure not to disturb anything. I wasn't entirely sure what I was looking for, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I'd find something that would confirm or deny all of this. Just when I was about to give up, my eyes fell on the bottom drawer, a drawer that was locked. I found a small key in the upper drawer and quietly unlocked it. Inside was an old cell phone I had never seen Henry use before, just sitting there, almost like it was waiting to be discovered. My heart pounded as I picked it up, feeling as though I was on the edge of discovering something huge but terrifying. I powered it on, and the screen lit up, asking for a passcode. It was like hitting a wall. I couldn't access anything, couldn't read a single message. But the very presence of this hidden phone was enough to send my suspicions spiraling further. I set the phone down, feeling as though I had just touched something forbidden, something I was never meant to find. This phone, a device I had never seen Henry use before, felt like a hidden piece of a puzzle I didn't even know existed. Why would he need a secret phone? And if it was important enough to keep hidden, what was really going on? Questions flooded my mind, each one without a clear answer. Gently, I placed the phone back in the drawer, carefully locking it as it was before, and tiptoed out of his study, trying not to make a sound. Each step felt heavier, as if I were carrying the weight of this forbidden knowledge. I felt guilt creeping up inside me, knowing I'd invaded his privacy, yet an unsettling curiosity was stronger, refusing to let go. By the time I closed my bedroom door behind me, an uneasy feeling lingered, as though I had just stepped into a dark world of secrets I wasn't ready to confront. Back in my room, I sat down heavily on my bed, my heart still pounding and my thoughts spinning. I tried closing my eyes, hoping that everything would fade, but the image of that phone stayed vivid in my mind, taunting me with its mystery. Anna's words echoed over and over, each one piercing deeper. They looked very close, as if no one else was around. A strange mix of fear, hurt, and a vague sense of betrayal washed over me, feelings I couldn't quite name. Part of me thought about telling my mother, but the thought made me pause immediately. She had endured so much already, her health had weakened, and the last thing I wanted was to burden her with something so painful, especially when I didn't have any clear answers myself. The next morning at breakfast, I tried my best to act normal, though I felt anything but. Every step toward the dining room felt like an effort to conceal the storm inside me. As I sat down, I couldn't help but watch Henry closely, searching for any hint, any small sign that would give away what I now feared might be true. But he was his usual self, calm, attentive, and caring. He asked my mother how she was feeling, helped her cut her food, and gently assisted her whenever she needed it. Each of these simple gestures confused me even more. I observed his every move, hoping to catch a glimpse of something hidden, a crack in his seemingly perfect exterior. But there was nothing. He acted completely natural, as though no secrets lay buried beneath his steady demeanor. I watched his expression, the warmth in his eyes when he looked at my mother, and a sense of bewilderment filled me. How could someone harbor such a secret and still act with such sincerity? The longer I looked, the more I felt lost within my own emotions, torn between wanting to trust him and the nagging fear that all I had believed about him might have been a carefully crafted illusion. I sat there, feeling utterly torn, not knowing what to do next. Part of me was desperate to confront Henry about the phone, to push for the truth and put an end to this gnawing suspicion. But then, fear crept in, holding me back like an invisible hand, stopping me from asking the questions I wasn't sure I was ready to hear the answers to. If Henry truly was hiding something, would he admit it just because I confronted him? Or would he simply cover it with more lies, shattering the calmness our family had carefully maintained? All day long, I wrestled with the dilemma of whether to confront him or stay silent, secretly searching for more clues. Each option felt daunting, as if I stood at a crossroads, each path leading to painful consequences. One path held the fear of uncovering a truth that could tear apart my family, the other meant enduring this silent doubt that was slowly eating away at my peace. Every time I thought about the possibility of our family unraveling, my heart felt heavy, paralyzing me with the weight of that decision. As evening fell, I still hadn't found a clear answer. Inside, I was a mess of tangled emotions, confusion, fear, and a strange, overwhelming loneliness from carrying the secret by myself. The burden felt far too heavy, yet I couldn't share it with anyone. My mother, the person I loved most and wanted to protect, was the very one I had to shield from this potential heartache. The thought made my heart ache even more, as though by keeping this secret, I was betraying her in some way, even if my intention was to protect her. Each moment that passed seemed to pull me further into a swirl of anxiety and helplessness. I wondered if I could keep living with this doubt without it wearing me down, or if eventually, I'd reach a breaking point where I'd have no choice but to confront the truth, no matter the cost. I sat there, staring blankly into space, trying to find some semblance of calm within, but the questions remained unanswered, leaving me feeling lost, as if I were wandering in the darkness of my own life. In the days that followed, the unease hung over me like a dark cloud, refusing to let me rest. I tried to keep myself calm, telling myself that I was overreacting, but every time I saw Henry caring for my mother, the doubts would creep back in. The memory of that hidden phone haunted me, and Anna's words replayed over and over in my mind, pulling me deeper into a spiral of confusion and suspicion. Henry, the man I had always trusted, the one who had always shown so much kindness and dedication to my mother, now seemed distant, unfamiliar in a way I couldn't explain. One late night, after everyone had gone to bed, I found myself standing outside Henry's study again. This time, I knew I couldn't leave without getting answers. I told myself that no matter what I found, I had to know the truth, even if it would be difficult to face. My hands trembled slightly as I turned the doorknob, trying not to make a sound. Stepping into the quiet room, which smelled faintly of old wood and the familiar scent of Henry's books and papers, I felt a mixture of fear and determination settle over me. I quietly opened the drawer where I had found the phone before. This time, I wasn't just going to glance through, I intended to go through every drawer, every folder, anything that might give me more insight into the secret life Henry seemed to be hiding. I flipped through stacks of papers, examined every little object, scanned over old family photos, yet nothing seemed out of the ordinary. Everything was just work documents, old receipts, and photos from years past. There was nothing that gave me any more clarity. Just as I was about to give up, my eyes caught sight of a small slip of paper wedged deep in the corner of the drawer. It was a business card, with the name of a man I didn't recognize, and the address of a bar downtown. My heart stopped when I realized it was the same bar Anna had mentioned. I read the name and address over and over, hoping I was mistaken, but no, it was the exact same bar where Anna had said she saw Henry. My hand shook as I held the card. At that moment, a whirlwind of emotions overwhelmed me: fear, sadness, anger, and disbelief. I didn't want to believe it, but that small business card felt like irrefutable proof, confirming everything Anna had told me. For so long, I had trusted Henry, always seeing him as a steady, reliable force for our family. But now, this card felt like a knife, cutting through the trust I'd held in him all these years. I sank into the chair, clutching the card in my hand, my mind racing with thoughts and emotions I could barely process. I knew I had to face this truth, but I didn't know where to begin. Every thought, every possible decision, felt painful and exhausting. I just sat there, feeling the weight of the situation pressing down on me, as if my whole world had crumbled, and I wasn't sure if I had the strength to face it all. The next morning, as I walked down the stairs, each step felt heavier, as if I were heading into an unavoidable confrontation. I had barely slept, my mind racing with thoughts that led me to one conclusion: I couldn't stay silent forever. The business card from the bar was still in my pocket, a small, painful reminder of what I feared might be true. I knew I had to confront this somehow, but just the thought of directly asking Henry made my heart pound with anxiety and hesitation. When I sat down at the breakfast table, I was more tense than ever. Henry was his usual self, calmly preparing breakfast, asking my mom how she'd slept, and smiling gently when she responded. Watching this, I couldn't shake the unsettling thought that maybe all of this, his tenderness, his care, might be part of a carefully crafted facade. Each small act of kindness he showed my mother felt like a twist of the knife, deepening my sense of doubt and confusion. When my mom got up to refill her tea, I found myself alone with Henry in the quiet of the kitchen. This was my chance to ask him directly about the hidden phone and the business card now burning a hole in my pocket. I looked over at him, trying to summon the courage, but my throat tightened. Henry looked up and met my gaze, smiling warmly, completely at ease. His eyes held that familiar kindness, but for the first time, it felt almost foreign. I opened my mouth, the words hovering just on the edge, ready to spill out. But an intense fear surged up, holding me back. I was terrified that a single question might shatter everything my family had. If what I suspected was true, I didn't know how I could shield my mother from the pain that would come. I took a deep breath, steeling myself, but in the end, I just gave him a weak smile, my eyes dropping back down to my coffee cup, the words stuck in my throat. Henry continued to talk to me, asking me about my work, my future plans, all in his usual gentle tone, as if nothing was amiss. His voice was warm and steady, offering no sign of anything hidden. Yet with every word, I felt more conflicted, as though I were sitting across from a stranger wearing the face of someone I loved and trusted. I tried to respond casually, to mask the storm inside me, but every moment I sat there was a reminder of the deepening gap between us, a gap filled with secrets I wasn't sure I was ready to uncover. Then I decided to hire a private detective to follow my uncle. I waited through those days, with a restless and anxious heart. A few days later, the investigator sent me a sealed envelope, carefully containing photos that he had taken. My heart pounded as I opened the envelope, and with each picture, my suspicions were confirmed more clearly than ever. In these photos, my stepfather and another man were seen frequently meeting at a short-term rental apartment in the city. That apartment seemed to be their secret meeting place, and their encounters happened mostly in the evenings or on weekends, exactly the times my stepfather claimed he was working overtime. These images felt like a blow to the fragile trust one had left. No longer just speculation or a hunch, everything was now undeniable, a hidden relationship my stepfather had deliberately concealed. At this point, I could no longer deny that something truly serious was unfolding. But I didn't stop there. I asked the investigator to dig deeper into the identity of the man in the photos. I needed to know who he was, and how long this connection with my stepfather had existed. A few days later, I received a report stating that this man was someone my stepfather had known from before. They might have met through groups he had joined recently. Their relationship wasn't just a fleeting connection, but had lasted long enough to become a significant part of his life. This information left me feeling even more betrayed and disappointed. After years of living together as a family, I never imagined I would be facing this bitter truth, that the person I had trusted could be hiding such a monumental secret. After uncovering the truth, I made up my mind to confront my stepfather. A storm of emotions swirled within me: anger, disappointment, and, somehow, a lingering trace of sympathy. We sat across from each other in the living room, the very room that had witnessed so many warm family moments. Trying to keep my voice calm but firm, I broke the silence. "Is there something you want to tell me?" He looked up at me, sadness flickering in his eyes, then lowered his gaze, almost as if he had been expecting this moment. After a pause, he took a deep breath and began to speak, his voice heavy with regret. He explained that he'd tried to be a good husband, to be a dependable presence for my mom and our family. But deep down, he admitted, he'd always felt an emptiness, like a part of him was trapped, held back in a life that didn't truly reflect who he was. "I never wanted to hurt your mom," he said, his voice cracking with emotion. "But there's a part of me that I just couldn't keep hidden any longer. I know it's wrong, and I know it's hurting everyone, but I couldn't bring myself to stop." Hearing his confession, I sensed the inner struggle that had plagued him, torn between the duty he felt toward us and his desire to be true to himself. This admission made me feel conflicted. Part of me was furious, unable to accept this betrayal, yet I could also see the pain and loneliness he'd silently endured. Still, nothing could erase the sting of his actions. All the years of building this family, of my mom's sacrifices and love, felt suddenly fragile in the face of this painful truth. We sat there in silence, both lost in thought. I knew that this conversation couldn't mend the wounds inside me, but at least it brought clarity. I could finally see a fuller picture of the man I'd known all these years. Yet, in that moment, I understood something clearly: things between us, between our family, would never be the same again. Hearing his confession, I felt as if my heart had sunk into an abyss. This betrayal was beyond anything I could have imagined, and it was nearly impossible to accept. Anger and disappointment surged within me, but as I looked into his weary, regretful eyes, I sensed a pain that went far beyond words. He had spent so many years under pressure, bound by the image of a dutiful husband and a respected father, while silently suppressing desires he could never share. At that moment, for the first time in my life, I felt an intense conflict between love and betrayal. Strangely, I found myself feeling sympathy for him, for all that he had to conceal, to keep this family intact. I wondered if he could have lived differently, without the weight of expectations and responsibilities pressing on him. Maybe then, he wouldn't have had to endure those years of loneliness, hiding parts of himself even within his own home. I looked at him, this man who had been my mother's support and someone I'd admired. Now, he seemed split into two different people: the person I had trusted and loved, and a stranger with secrets I had never imagined. A sense of loss washed over me as I realized that the trust one had placed in him all these years now felt like a fragile illusion. Questions echoed in my mind: how can I move past this conflict? Part of me wanted to understand him, to extend some form of compassion, yet another part could not ignore the pain he had caused my mother and our family. As we sat there in silence, I felt an invisible distance growing between us. The room became unbearably quiet, filled only with a swirl of emotions: love, hurt, and a compassion I could neither explain nor dismiss. That night, I sat alone in the quiet darkness of my room, surrounded by shadows and a torrent of conflicting thoughts. The house was silent, but in my mind, everything seemed chaotic, each thought louder than the last, refusing to give me a moment of peace. The truth I'd just learned felt like an enormous weight on my chest, making it hard to breathe. Part of me felt that my mother deserved to know everything, to no longer live in an illusion of a perfect family that had been shattered from within. But then, fear took hold, spreading through my mind. My mother had endured so much already, working tirelessly to rebuild her life and find stability in this family. If she knew the truth, would she be able to handle the shock? Or would it break her, seeing everything she believed in so ruthlessly stripped away? I sat there, picturing her face if she found out, how devastated she would be, and just the thought made me feel powerless and torn. As dawn broke, I realized I hadn't slept a wink. Eventually, I made my way downstairs, my steps heavy, each one weighed down by questions and internal conflicts. Reaching the bottom of the stairs, I paused. There, in the soft morning light, I saw my mother sitting quietly in the living room, just as she did every morning. Sunlight filtered through the window, illuminating an old family photo in her hands. She was gazing at each face in that picture, her eyes filled with a simple happiness and a gentle smile on her lips. I could tell she was lost in memories, perhaps recalling moments she thought were safe, secure. When she looked up at me, she gave me that familiar, warm smile, the same smile that had comforted me since childhood. A wave of warmth filled me, but so did a pang of guilt. Watching her, I realized she had no idea what was happening around her. She was still wrapped in the belief of a loving home, with faith in the man she'd trusted all these years. I stood there, feeling as if an invisible wall had formed between us. Inside, I was torn between the need to reveal the truth and the desire to shield her from this painful reality. I wondered if I could carry this secret on my own, to protect her from facing yet another heartbreak. Time seemed to stand still, and I could only stand there, watching her, filled with conflicting emotions and uncertainty, not knowing which path was right for her, or for myself. Some time after the storm seemed to have settled, my mother's health began to decline. The illness came quietly at first, just occasional fatigue, but gradually, more serious signs emerged. She grew weaker, and her energy faded until some days, she could barely get out of bed. Often, she would just sit silently, gazing out the window with a distant look in her eyes, as if lost in thought she couldn't share with anyone. I did my best to take care of her, to spend as much time with her as I could, but each day, I watched helplessly as her strength slipped away, feeling a growing sense of powerlessness. In those final months, my mother kept up a brave face, trying to smile whenever I was near, as if she didn't want me to worry. But I sensed there was something she was keeping inside. Her gaze, so tender and thoughtful, sometimes seemed as if it held words unspoken, as if she wanted to tell me something but held back, carrying her burden alone. Then, one peaceful morning, she slipped away quietly, leaving me with a void that no words could ever fill. After the funeral, as I sorted through her belongings, I found a small, weathered journal tucked carefully in her drawer. The notebook was old, its pages yellowed, each filled with her familiar, neat handwriting. Holding the journal in my hands, I felt a pang of both sorrow and curiosity, unsure of what I would find inside. Slowly, I opened it, reading through her reflections on life, family, and her love for me, thoughts she had never shared aloud. Then, I reached a passage written with firmer strokes, and my heart stopped as I realized what I was reading. She had known the truth all along. In those carefully penned lines, she revealed that she had discovered my stepfather's betrayal long before I did. She wrote about the heartbreak, the sleepless nights, and the inner turmoil she faced, choosing between revealing the painful truth and preserving my happiness. She had known everything yet had chosen to keep silent, bearing the entire weight of it alone to spare me from heartbreak. Beneath the sorrowful words, she had left small notes of comfort to herself, as if trying to find strength. She reminded herself that everything she did was for me, that the peace and stability of our family were worth any personal pain she had to endure. I could imagine her sitting there in the quiet of the night, writing down these thoughts as the rest of us slept, quietly pouring out her feelings on paper as she faced her private sorrow, unknown to anyone. As I read her final entries, tears streamed down my face, soaking into the worn pages that held so much of her heart. It felt as though I was losing her all over again. The pain wasn't just in her absence, it was in realizing that she had known, had carried the burden in silence, without a single complaint or word of blame. Each line overflowed with her boundless love, and my heart ached with both gratitude and regret. Sitting there, clutching her journal close, I realized that I had never truly understood the depth of her sacrifices, and I wondered if I would ever be worthy of such a love.